Hello and welcome to this first Fireside Chat in the Reimagining Educational Practices for Open or REPO for short community event series. And I'm very happy to introduce Serah Rono, who is Director of Community Development and Engagement at the Carpentries, and she will chat with Brennan, who is Scholarly Communication Educational Librarian at UCLA, about his role in FOSS 11 Scholarly Communication Institute, FSCI for short, and the impact of the pandemic upon FSCI and open science training more broadly. And we hope it will be an interactive conversation. Thanks a lot for joining us, and handing over to Serah.
Thank you so much, Irina, and thank you everyone for joining this Fireside Chat with Marty today. I'm very excited to have all of us in the call. Just to remind everyone, we'll also be observing the FOSS 11 Code of Conduct, and Irina is going to share that with us in chat. All right, Marty, it's really great to be chatting with you today, and I want us to start with an icebreaker, something to get us all warmed up. And I welcome everyone who's in this call to share in the chat as well. My question for Icebreaker is, what is an incredible piece of literature that you've come by or read recently that you don't mind sharing with us, and what stood out for you in it? Marty?
Sure, so I was preempted with this question, so I have two answers. I'm not much of a fiction reader myself, and I do so much reading in my work that I look to television and performance for the literature that I want to get. And a really well-written show that my husband and I have been binging like crazy is Call the Midwife, but we should never watched, and it's been on for 10 years. And it's wonderful. The dialogue that's placed in the mouths of the nuns and the midwives in that show is just delightful. So I really recommend that. But in terms of what book I'm reading, it's this. Written by the monks of New Skeet here in upstate New York, how to raise dogs. They're a monastery that's known for raising German Shepherds. You know, I'd never heard of it, but my sister recommended it, and it's a wonderful, you know, how to start with training a puppy and, you know, how to properly set it up. Surprisingly written by a bunch of monks that live in upstate New York. So I really enjoy that. So
that's incredible. Thank you for sharing. I welcome everyone to share what you're reading, what you've read that has been really good for you and that you don't mind sharing with us. I'm reading a book right now. It's by George Saunders, and it's his thoughts on kindness. It's really interesting because kindness is something we talk about every day. But that doesn't come naturally to us all, and it stemmed from a question he got, and the question was, what are some of the things that he regrets most in life? And he says he regrets not being kind or kinder at different stages of his life. It's a very good book. It is very thought-provoking. And there's also a speech about it from a graduation ceremony in case you prefer to listen rather than read. All right, thank you for sharing, Marty. That's very interesting, and I'm excited that you're watching Call the Midwife. That's very good. All right, so let's start talking about FSCI and your involvement in it. Right, so what is FSCI? How and when did it come about? Who were involved? Do you mind giving us an overview?
Sure, I'll do my best to do it quick. FSCI stands for the FOSS 11 Scholarly Communication Institute. Mm-hmm. So FOSS 11 is a group that started in 2011. And the acronym stands for the Future of Research Communications in E-Scholarship. It's a very informal for a group like this, a group that consists of researchers, publishers, librarians, educators, administrators, scholars that come together to focus on ways to improve the way that we do scholarly communication, research communication as we step into the future. and to evolve those works. It started around a conference called Beyond the PDF that was very successful and had a big splash back in 2011, or it may have been 2012, I'm not sure. But then later on, the group, members of Force 11 were chatting around a breakfast table, I believe, in 2016, and said, you know, we need something to educate new people or do more of the knowledge transfer that we talk about within Force 11 to present courses and focus on topics to educate new members, get them up to speed on scholarly communication. We should have a summer institute. And that's how the idea of FSCI was born, a summer institute where you could bring people together onto a college campus or some other setting like that, where we could focus on these issues for a very intensive week. And that's how FSCI started in 2017 and 18. It happened in coordination with the UC San Diego library. And it was born there and was pretty successful, starting off with 100 people, then rising to 130 people in its second year. But then the UCLA Library Administration changed and different priorities came up, so they weren't supporting FSCI as much as they had in the past. So I connected with the people in FSCI to help bring it over to a partnership with the UCLA Library. A couple of those key people are here on this call. Dan O'Donnell was one of the founders of FSCI and president of Force at the time, I believe. Dan, or just coming off of it, if not president at the time. And my boss, Allison Scott, the AUL for Scholarly Communication at UCLA Library, is also on the call. And they were, very much a part of that communal effort. And anything that I say about FSCI, if I use the word I, what I mean is the word FSCI, because it's always a community effort. It's always a volunteer-driven effort, and everything that I'm doing is really just riding on top of the wave of all of that and making sure everything stays connected as best that I can. But it's a community-driven effort and a community-derived benefit that this institute is. So we were going into our fourth in-person FSCI in 2020. We were going to do it on campus in the summer of 2020, but of course, the pandemic came along. And so we very rapidly switched to an online version. We were hoping to get up to 180 people in the in-person Summer Institute, but instead, by doing it online, we drew 350 people. And so that really has been an earthquake to us. That yes, we changed to the in-person, and there was a lot of hand-wringing. Is will we be able to reproduce what we did in person? Will we be able to keep the FSCI-ness, that great community feeling that we got in that Summer Institute of people connecting in the lunchroom and in around the coffee station between course sessions, and in social activities in the evenings and stuff. So we very carefully tried to craft great participant experience aspects to FSCI, and I see Nathan Woods on the call as well. He's one of the leaders of that group that brings community efforts, community events, excuse me, into the online presence. So anyway, the big success of being able to not only pull more people, but pull people from a greater scope of the world. You know, we had people from over 40 countries on all 6 continents. And we've been able to do that in the past, but certainly not at the scale that we did this time. And we're hoping to replicate and maybe even see that expand a little bit this year. We already have 150 applications for FSCI scholarships that will be awarded in the next few weeks. Almost 100 enrollees already. And this is ahead of when we opened registration last year. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we're ahead of schedule a little bit, and things are looking very promising. So.
Amazing. That's great work. Congratulations. And thank you for sharing that overview. And I appreciate that you've given a shout out to people who are on the call who've helped move the work forward to date. All right, so one of the things we're going to be talking about is open science training, and you'll be elaborating a bit more about that. And I wanted us to start by doing something that I really enjoy from the Carpentries. It's an activity called jargon busting, and I'll share a link shortly that expounds on what jargon busting is, but summarily it is an activity at the start of any workshop where key terms and concepts are expounded on. And so people get to share their knowledge and understanding around specific terms so that as the workshop goes along, everyone is on the same page with regard to what is being discussed. So I want us to do a very short jargon busting exercise for the sake of our fireside chat. How do you as FSCI define open science?
Okay, well, I'm gonna bust your little game. I'm not going to fall into your trap because at FSCI, you know, we do have definitions of open science, of course, that come out in the courses. And if you looked at the Force 11 manifesto from 2011, there's probably some definitional aspects to what is open science. But I could tell you we had a course submitted this year that it contained the phrase open science, and we encouraged them to broaden it out to open knowledge, open scholarship, and not scare away the humanists and the social scientists with the term open science that seems more focused on the hard sciences. And when people come in and come to FSCI, we look at FSCI as a platform and an incubator. A platform for people of different perspectives and different ideas of what open science means. You know, you might have somebody that works for one of the big publishers like Elsevier or Springer with a much different perspective on what they see as open science. And, you know, somebody working at one of the universities in the US or Europe might have a very different idea that contrasts with what publishers might say. And open science obviously looks very different in different areas of the world, whether it be South America, Asia, Oceania, any of those areas have different approaches to open science. We want everybody to bring their definitions and share them with each other. So I'm reluctant to say, here's FSCI's definition of open science. That's a bit anathema to what we do.
Thanks for expounding on that. I'll find the right link for everyone in a bit. If anyone is able to just search for that and paste in chat, that will be good. I'm also interested to hear what other people have found as definitions of open science out there that you particularly subscribe to or appreciate. You can share that with us in chat. Thank you, Martin. And I also appreciate what you said about wanting to move the conversation beyond the misconception that this is about hard sciences, so that you are more inclusive in your discussions around this. That's very interesting. All right. So one of the other bigger questions that I've been interested in for a long time is about the impact that open science has had for the time that communities have been involved in open science as a community, as a topic, as something that people are pursuing, and what kinds of discovery and breakthroughs it has enabled. And so more specifically for you, Marty, my question is, pre-pandemic, and again, all through 2020 and to present day, what are some of the greatest accomplishments that FSCI has registered?
Well, I would say, you know, pre-pandemic, that was part of the question. Okay, I would say, you know, just bringing a wide swath together. You know, one of the things that people consistently say about FSCI in evaluations is that they're amazed at the scope of people that is pulled together. Not just librarians and researchers that care about how research is disseminated and put extra effort into it, but also the administrators and the publishers and the technical people behind all of that work that come together into that space, and that we make such an effort to bring in the international community into the room with us. and make them part of not only the conversation, but part of the planning, part of the educational team. So that's probably our biggest accomplishment. I think what people see as what sets us apart from other similar efforts. It's definitely a niche community and crowd. It pulls together a great returning crowd every year that really love engaging in it, and so there's a great sense of FSCI community that we want to keep building on. And I would say our success through the pandemic is in expanding that community and really getting us primed for what's next for us.
Nice. I love that you perceive the community that you brought together over time as one of the biggest wins that you have. It's really great. Thanks for sharing, Marty. I want to remind everyone that you're welcome to also add your questions in chat as we go along, and I'll read them out somewhere during this conversation. So, or you can also raise your hand and we'll call on you to ask your question directly. Right, and so you are a scholarly communication education librarian at UCLA, Marty. So I want you to talk a bit about your role at FSCI and to also share how you found yourself where you are today in the organization.
Well, that's a long story. I don't know if an hour will cover it, but yeah, I started at UCLA as the copyright librarian, and my role and the things that I got into over the last 12 years went beyond copyright very quickly, and so scholarly communication really has always been my focus, truly, even though I'm looked to as the library's copyright expert, one among many, by the way. At this point, there's several other with great copyright skills, of course. And we folded education into the title when I started to get involved with FSCI 3 years ago. And, I was a key helper with Dan and Stephanie Hagstrom and Cameron Nealon in putting a package together and putting in front of UCLA Library Administration and getting them to agree to this new partnership that persists to this day. And that's been great to be like the library's lead on that. But of course, there's many people in the library that have taken on roles as teachers in the Institute, as heads of communication and contributing to the archive committee and the program committee, doing all kinds of work. And even student employees are the ones that monitor all the Zoom sessions during the FSCI sessions. So the library's supporting online going forward in a lot of dynamic ways. And it's been a privilege to be the point person for the library on it, among many, just to reinforce that. So, so how I got involved was just, I was charmed into FSCI by a couple of instructors. Danny Kingsley and Sarah Shreves put on a really great course called How to Change Policy at Your Institution and Still Have Friends When You're Done. That was a wonderful course that charmed me into it. And the leader of FSCI at the time, the director, Stephanie Hagstrom, also charmed me with, and has charmed many people into involvement in FSCI. And so that's how I got involved and how I fought so hard to bring it to UCLA and keep it alive. So.
Nice. Awesome. So you mentioned instructors, and I'm guessing these are instructors that facilitate the Summer Institute that FSCI has. I'm wondering, apart from that instructor role in the FSCI community, what are the other pathways of engagement that exist that people are able to take advantage of and get into FSCI as a community and participate actively?
Well, sure. There's 62 instructors this year and involved in 22 courses. Mm-hmm. So that's the easiest way to get involved in FSCI is to submit a course idea when we do our call for courses, usually in the fall, leading into the next summer. But there are several dozen people that are involved in different planning committees for FSCI, selecting the program, and other administrative committees. There's a communications committee. There's the participant experience committee that, again, Nathan Woods is one of the co-chairs of, along with Barbara Bordalejo, who's also on the call, I just noticed, sorry. And, they bring in a lot of people and get them engaged in different ways outside the classroom, and make connections happen. So again, we're a platform, and there's many ways for people to get connected in different networking opportunities within the conference and carry those things forward. Force 11 also then gives lots of platforms for those things to go forward, like such as forming a working group and carrying forward as a working group within Force 11 to take action, make change on a particular issue. It was within a Force 11 working group, and please, Dan and Fiona, correct me as I tell this, that, for example, it was a key platform for the formation of the fair data principles that we're all so familiar with. It wasn't the only platform. There was a lot of other groups involved in the final formation of fair data, but there was a couple of key moments where that working group was the platform that helped it reach its conclusion and get the fair data principles out into the world. So it's that kind of platform and incubator that we hope to be, and just allow people the space to come together and work on issues. And of course, FSCI in particular, as one corner of the Force 11 world, is where we educate each other. But of course, education always leads to new ideas, or hopefully good education leads to new ideas and people working together going forward.
Amazing. Thank you, Marty. So 62 instructors and the committees you mentioned sounds like a lot of really great work and important work that's happening within the community itself. And I'm wondering if that level of activity and participation was in any way affected, or if it shifted in any way last year, especially with the pandemic, and what that looked like and what adjustments you had to make.
Well, it's I think the community has remained stable through that, and has really risen to the occasion and given a lot of themselves into the effort of FSCI. There's only a few key support staff members that handle some of the nuts and bolts things that are actually paid. Almost everybody is volunteering their time, instructors and all of the support groups. Yeah, I think the community is always looking to expand, and I think we're going to have a lot of discussions at this year's FSCI about how we do that, and how we not necessarily expand FSCI itself, but just move forward and grow into the future in terms of community involvement. And, we hope to see FSCI continue as an online institute going into the future because of the advantages we've discovered under the new paradigm, that we can bring a wider swath of people into the room. But people do miss the in-person FSCI too. So how does that happen again? Because we know that it's going to be more difficult coming out of the pandemic to travel worldwide, and that's going to persist for a while. And it's not just pandemic concerns, but just other ways that people are having a hard time getting across borders, whether it be, for political or diplomatic reasons or for financial reasons. So we need FSCI Online to be the connective tissue, but there needs to be some kind of in-person FSCI events that maybe look a lot different than what we've done before. Maybe we do something similar than we have already done, do summer institutes again, but maybe there are things that are more regional in nature, more focused perhaps on an event where you bring instructors together to as an incubator to work on a particular curriculum, for example, that will then be offered up within the online FSCI. And these are just seeds of ideas that need to be talked about in the community and see what grows
Right.
out of community involvement.
Right. Thank you for preempting my next question and for answering part of it. But I still have a section I would like you to speak to if you're able to. So like you said, vaccines are becoming available to people around the world over time. And so some people have been exploring in-person trainings. Like you said, you might want to go back to some of that, but online is a model that seems to work well for you. I'm wondering specifically about the hybrid model where you have some people in a physical space together in person and then other people attending from online. So are hybrid trainings something that you've considered at FSCI as well?
Absolutely. You know, everything that I said before about, you know, in-person events being different going into the future, I think anything we do in person is going to have substantial hybrid elements to it, that we will have to have streaming events out of those in-person meetings, connecting with people, not just in synchronous ways that you do over a Zoom call, but really push towards asynchronous involvement as well. Don't just tap into a Zoom and watch talking heads tell you how it is, but contribute to building something together and a learning object that we all produce out of courses or educational experiences together. So certainly, and there's going to be that level, because anytime we do something in person, there's going to be a section of the FSCI and forced communities that can't get to the event, and we need to be able to make the benefits of the event available to them as much as we can.
Awesome. I like inclusivity as core to participation in your trainings. That's really important, and I'm glad you're thinking about it. So other than the question of online, in-person, hybrid events, what are some of the big questions that FSCI is faced with and working to address at present that you're able to share with us?
Well, you know, last year we had a focus on fair data, and which led us into many discussions on the care principles as well. We will have that kind of disciplinary and ScholComm specific issue as a focus the next time we have FSCI. But this year, because it's our 5th year, we're going to have a focus on the classic interview question: where do you see yourself in 5 years? And did we ask ourselves that question effectively 5 years ago? And because we are nowhere where we thought we would be at this moment in time 5 years ago. You know, we did have a plan, we did have goals that we were striving for, and now we're in a very different place. In some ways, more successful than we hoped in terms of the size of the FSCI community. But we're in a very different context, you know, in the online space, and we don't know what in-person FSCI looks like going forward because of the way of the world. So we need to ask ourselves again, where do we want to be in 5 years? And it's interesting to look at the utility of that question when it, you know, our answers were so naive 5 years ago, you know, not knowing, naive meaning just not knowing what was ahead of us, what was coming. So what is the utility, and what does it get? How does it benefit the community to ask the question? Of course, there's benefit to it, but what can it do for us? What can it really help us energize and focus on? So that's the basic frame of what we'll be doing within our plenary sessions at FSCI this year, is really looking at where not just FSCI was hoping to be at this point 5 years ago, but where the community trying to drive open knowledge and open scholarship was hoping the world would be, and that the efforts of FSCI would help us all get towards. And as we turn around and recommit towards, you know, the next 5 years, what are the best ways to direct our energies, not only on topics, but in how we get the community connected and how we teach them and when and where we do it. So.
Nice. Yeah, developing strategy is really core to to any organization at this point, and I think a lot of things have changed and very fast in recent months, and so.
And one other thing I want to say is, I mean, we look at the Carpentries, which has been so successful and just an amazing paradigm that has served people so well. And kudos to you, Serah, for your contributions to it and the rest of the Carpentries community. We wonder, like, does FSCI want to grow towards that kind of scale? That just kind of frightens me. In some ways, we maybe want FSCI to stay more modest and keep it more manageable and a real sense of a tight community. But
Right.
Again, that's a debatable point. So FSCI's ambitions aren't to take over the world here. The way it seems with the Carpentries, you just want everybody to learn. We want, more modest community with a more particular focus, perhaps, and a more focus on the theory and the issues in scholarly communication rather than the training and the skills. Even though training and skills will always be a facet and a part of it. So.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I was going to raise this at some point, and this is a good point to talk about it, I think. So there's many different organizations whose work overlaps at some level, and I'm actually wondering, right, for FSCI, so we have many people from different institutions and organizations whose work may intersect at some level with that of FSCI. And so have you identified opportunities for collaboration that you are currently exploring or are going to, in the near future, be inviting people to consider collaborating with you on?
Well, nothing leaps to mind right away in terms of active collaborations that we're looking at. And Dan and Fiona, please interrupt me and remind me of whatever I'm forgetting to bring up. I would say the community is certainly open to that conversation and those ideas. It has to fit with, what Force and the UCLA Library have in mind, right, and the Force and the FSCI community have in mind. But it's certainly an open question as we go forward. And with so many different communities at work, and that's what, REPO is all about, to get us all together to talk about where we cross over and where we work together. Yes, we certainly see, probably through the REPO lens, the best opportunity to do collaborative work and come up with products of our work that can help other people in the same general space, do it better and do it more collectively.
Yeah, I like that, because it's important not to reinvent the wheel, but also because a lot of the communities we work with and depend on are volunteers, are made up of volunteers, and they're in all these different pockets where we're doing different kinds of work, right? It's important that we find ways to bridge between our different organizations and the activities that we do, so that community members don't necessarily feel like they have to make the decision about, do I belong in the Carpentries or FSCI, and I have to choose one rather than take away from both what makes sense for me.
And let me add too, Fiona helpfully threw it in chat. We do have a partnership going on right now with a disciplinary focus that we are working with people from AGU, the American Geophysical Union, with EarthCube and with ESIP in reaching out to their communities. And we've crafted a course specific to those researchers to help draw those people in. FSCI, like I said, does really pride itself with bringing people in from across those communities, but we have no problem drawing the librarians, for example, because there's so many scholar communication librarians. They have scholar communication baked into their titles. It makes sense for them to go to FSCI. It makes sense for them to get support. But when you're in one of the specific disciplines, like geosciences, they need to know that there's a course designed for them that they can get funding for, and will help them, and is demonstrable, will help them when they go back to their home institution, and then they get support for the funding and for the time clearance to get to come to FSCI. So we've worked with professionals connected to AGU and ESIP, specifically Shelley Stahl from AGU, and Chris Erdman, and Sam Saplinski from UC Berkeley is the course coordinator for the course that came together around those topics. So yes, thank you, Fiona, for mentioning that. Like I was thinking of the question in terms of other people that are trying to do what FSCI does in general sense, but these discipline specific areas, we're trying to build more bridges into those as well, to bring more researchers into the room than we've been able to draw so far.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that, Marty. I saw in chat that Daniel mentioned a satellite event that's being planned for November in Chile, and I think it made me think of a question that it's fine if there's no answer to it. It's one that we are currently actively considering in the Carpentries, and I'd love to learn from you as well. So where you have trainings or events in countries where English is not necessarily the language used for instruction, how do you approach such trainings if you've found a way around it?
Well, I haven't had much of a hand in the Chile planning. Dan, do you have anything to add on this topic?
Yeah, I would say that's one where we're practicing. We're picking up generally when we have tried these kind of things, we're using something known as the translation toolkit that was developed via Global Outlook Digital Humanities, which sounds much fancier than it is. Basically, we use a system called Whispering, which we picked up in Cuba. We were at a meeting in Cuba, and what they did there was, enough academics speak English and another language that students or other people who don't have English or would just like a second set of ears can just sit beside somebody who can do that. And then the big place where it interacts particularly is, you do things like, if you give your talk in one language, you have your slides in another language, often your slides in English and your talk in a different language. And then if you're asked a question or give an answer to a question, that's the place where language difficulties can be the most.
Right.
But it's very easy to have somebody stand up afterwards and just summarize what was said. The idea actually came from a digital humanities conference probably about 8 or 9 years ago, where there were some Japanese graduate students who had excellent English, but were very nervous about their ability to spontaneously answer questions. And so when they were asked a question and they were a little bit worried about it, somebody just stood up and paraphrased it for them. And then that was enough to get everything running again. So that's my understanding of how we're going to be doing it in Chile, is we'll be trying that. How that works on Zoom, I don't know.
Right. Thank you for that answer, Daniel. I really appreciate it. So in the Carpentries, we've like Marty said, we have this great community from around the world. And so we've gotten to a point where people are self-organizing from the different regions that they're from, and they're actually translating the lesson material we have into their languages, into different languages, and testing them out in workshop environments in local spaces. And one of the considerations we now have is how to keep those resources updated, how to check for quality of the lesson material, and to make sure that things still mean the same thing once they're translated. And I appreciate the mention of a translation toolkit. I'll be looking into that as well. there's lots to learn. Right. So at this point, I would like to welcome questions for Marty. I have plenty more, but I don't want to dominate the discussion, and we have 15 minutes left. So do people have questions for Marty about FSCI? I see a hand.
Dan O'Donnell has a question for me about FSCI.
I have actually, it's a question for Serah about FSCI. And that is one of the goals I know that we've been working on, and Marty's been working on a fair bit, and he mentioned it a little bit about the AGU, has been to work with communities and to fit them into that multidisciplinary, multi-community world, to find that balance between discipline specific and the broader thing. We've had carpentry workshops at FSCI in the past. How do you, as a leader of the Carpentries, see the relationship of the Carpentries to something like FSCI, particularly FSCI with its model, but also to other open science groups?
That's a very difficult but also important question, I think. And it's one of the big things that we keep asking ourselves. So people come to the Carpentries because they want to learn how to code, but there's all these supporting elements that go hand in hand. If someone is to take what they've learned in a Carpentries workshop and take it away and employ it in the work environment and do it successfully. And so one of the big questions has been about the support that exists in the different organizations that people work in, the different institutions they're in. So I'm from this institution and I've gone through Carpentries lesson training and things like that. And one of the things I've discovered is that data can actually be published and shared publicly with other people. But then this is not something that my organization necessarily supports. And so that will likely be the end of everything I've learned, because I can't necessarily share things with people on GitHub, for example, if I had data and things to support my research that I wanted to share. But if people knew about FSCI and FSCI was able to share with them a lot of the open science resources and how-tos, and they were able to bring this to the institutions and organizations to show people in leadership that, you know, this kind of support exists and there's guidelines for how to do different things, and this is where to start, and here's other organizations that have done it and done it well, then there's a whole ecosystem to support what people are learning and wanting to employ in their workplaces and in their work with data. And so how I see this as working well together is, you know, wherever we are positioned as different organizations, being able to draw those links to other work in the ecosystem that exists and the what it answers to that the Carpentries doesn't necessarily answer or FSCI doesn't necessarily answer, and being very bold about listing out each other and saying, if you want this, the Carpentries is the best place to go. And if you need this, then this institution, this community is the best place to go. And in some places, finding ways to bridge that gap so that as a community member, I don't have to go and find out how to join the Carpentries and become a community member, then separately go find out how to be in FSCI and be a community member before I can begin to have this conversation. So being that bridge so that when someone talks to Marty, they find this existing bridge that, you know, once you are on this bridge, you are connected to FSCI and Carpentries, and you need not worry about how, you know, to go about joining these different organizations. And so I know that's not a straightforward answer, and we are only experimenting at this level. And how we are doing it right now is we have this community leadership program that we've sort of introduced in the last year, and we're trying to onboard people to. And what it does is it trains people about the elements of being in these different communities that make sense no matter whether they're in the Carpentries or whether they are elsewhere. So like, for example, Marty mentioned FSCI has instructors, the Carpentries has instructors as well, and there's an instructor training program, right? And so there's best practices for teaching that are presented in such a program. And so whether you're teaching in the Carpentries or you go on to teach at FSCI, that's skill that you've been empowered with. And so if we considered ways that we could empower people with these overarching skills or resources that they need, so that no matter where they're going in the different communities they're in, then they're able to employ those skills and they mean the same thing, then that would be a good start. And then finding ways to equip them with resources so they're able to advocate for better practices where there's other people who make decisions that are involved that they need to pitch this to. So giving them those resources so that they don't feel they're on their own, they feel supported, and there's sort of solid ground where they point leadership to. It's a very winded answer. I hope it helps.
Could I ask the same, Marty? Yeah.
I was good. I mean, your decentralized model has really empowered, carpentries to go around the world. So, I mean, I bragged earlier that we have 62 instructors. How many carpentries instructors are there worldwide, would you say?
That's a good question. I want to give you the most recent one. We have, and I'm looking at this page, 1 second. We have 3,260 instructors. That's the page I'm looking at. If you scroll down to the 3 circles, it shows how many people have gone through the workshops, how many people teach in the workshops, and how many workshops we've had to date. And those numbers change as workshops happen from week to week. So that's a number. It's impressive. Not everyone is active, and that's why I was asking you about, how the pandemic has affected participation, because we found that not as many instructors who are able to teach pre-pandemic are available to teach nowadays. And so we have this inactive or dormant set of community members who would love to, but for various reasons are unable to teach in an online setting. So, yeah.
Oh, really? Okay. And so you're struggling to find ways to give them the platform they need.
No, quite the contrary. So we are learning to respect that decision to step away, because if online doesn't work for me, that's fine. I will come back when we're no longer online, if we get to that point in the future.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood.
So trying to balance expectations without placing the burden on the community to have to, adopt the new practice if they're not able to.
One of the questions we're eagerly exploring, like in the steering committee of FSCI, is how do we decide what counts as a FSCI event and what doesn't? So as we look to more varied kinds of events coming out of the pandemic, different scales, maybe regional events, like we're doing in Chile, for example, what are the criteria before we will lend out the FSCI name, and allow people to present themselves as a FSCI branded event? Is it, what is the scope of topics and ideas that we want people to stay focused on? What is the kind of community that we want to see fostered through the event? Those kinds of definitional aspects of, if you're going to do something and call it FSCI, we'll let you do it if you push these buttons and check these boxes, So we're working on that ourselves, and that's part of that 5 years discussion that we're going to have at FSCI this year, is helping us define those parameters.
Yeah, we've had to do that as well, because sometimes people will find the lessons and they're available online for free, but they want to organize their own workshops. So how do we differentiate between what is called a Carpentries workshop and a Carpentry style workshop? The difference being that the latter is inspired by how the Carpentries teaches, but doesn't necessarily have a Carpentries instructor in the room, for example. So we have a workshops administration team, and they think about this thoroughly, and they're constantly expounding on what this means. But currently, what qualifies as a Carpentries workshop will, for example, be something that teaches using the Carpentries curriculum and has at least one instructor in the room. So on the same link that I shared, if you scroll to the bottom, there's a section about what are the requirements for a Carpentries workshop. And there's 5, I think, 5 things listed in there. And if yours doesn't meet that criteria, that's still fine. You can label it a carpentry style. So to say it's inspired by, because it doesn't meet the criteria, and that's also fine.
Yeah, and if we can somehow manage to get FSCI to a place like that, that we can really just give it away quickly and easily, the frame and the idea, and let people run with it in their corner of the world, I think that would be a great result. But again, there is the question of scale, and we're struggling to find the right funder to support FSCI for the frame that it puts around what we're trying to do. We haven't found the right funder to support what we're doing. And so that's still a struggle. It's a lot easier to pay the bills when it's an online course, I'll tell you that, than when you're scheduling something, in a conference room, and you have to schedule hotel rooms and travel. That's a whole different, story. But still, there is a budget that needs to be laid out and paid. And how do we sustain FSCI is, still needs more stable and regular funding.
There's something that Greg Wilson, the founder of the Carpentries, as it's known today. So he founded Software Carpentry, and efforts go back as far back as 1998. So whatever you see as the Carpentries is over 20 years of work. And there's been people coming in and going away, and others coming in and going away. And a lot of it has been organic growth, because the community comes in. And if I was learning in 1998, surely over the years I've wanted to pass along what I've learned. So I've become an instructor, and then I've started to mentor instructors. So I became a trainer, and I became a leader in the community in some way, right? And maybe I thought to start writing lessons that others in different domains that haven't been represented will use to learn. But all of that really changes, and the kinds of things that people are doing in the community still changes. There's something that Greg Wilson likes to say, and it's that it's important to know when to stop. And I love that you're actively considering that. Actually, what he says is, it's important to know when to close out a community, which sounds very extreme, but I think a really good thing to consider as you think about the question of sustainability for what FSCI will look like is, when do we know when to stop, right? So that you're constantly evolving with that question in mind, and designing ways for people to participate that continue to benefit them, to develop them professionally or in the ways they want to develop, but also knowing past this point, we will not continue, we will point people to this and this other communities, for example.
Yeah, we want to avoid, growth just for the sake of growth. But, are we growing into something that we want to be? And does that growth accomplish something that we need to accomplish?
Absolutely. All right. I really love that you brought me into your Fireside Chat. Thank you for sharing your space with me.
Oh, thank you thank you so much, Serah, for the work that you do and the great questions that you frame this whole conversation around.
Absolutely. So for people who may not yet be in FSCI, how can we keep up with what FSCI is doing? How can we be part of a community?
Well, the best way right now is to register for FSCI. Registration closes on July 6th for courses. So we encourage you to come. There is a scholarship opportunity too that closes this Friday. Actually, don't tell anybody, but we won't close it until Monday, really. But the due date is Friday for a scholarship application, and you just need to go find the FSCI website, and you'll see the scholarship application right at the top. I can drop the FSCI website into chat as well.
Yeah.
But for those watching the recording of the Zoom, I'll just say, yeah, find FSCI 2021. Register for a course if you can. If it's too expensive, for $10, you can just come to the plenary sessions, which I promise will be fun and interesting on their own. And you can come to all the community events and get connected with the community of FSCI for $10 is the entry fee. That's just to keep away the non-serious folks, the $10. So come join us there. You can learn more about the FSCI community. You can reach out to us by emailing us at fisci-info@force11.org. And that's an email that we monitor and welcome people into the community planning of FSCI. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Marty. And thank you for being our guest today for this fast fireside chat. I think it's been really enjoyable for me to hear from you. And thank you everyone for coming and being with us. And I hope you have a great rest of your day today.
Thank you so much for chatting, Serah and Marty, and we'll have more chats like this in REPO series. For example, Fiona will be talking to Helen Claire from GISC and European Open Science Cloud Synergy and Future Projects. Then Serah's colleague Al will be chatting with Erzbet from DARIA, which is the European Infrastructure for Humanities. And also in the end of June, we hope to have a call on community open science principles before, during, and after pandemics. And Chris Erdman will be moderating this event. So expect more news from us. And thanks a lot for joining today.
Thanks, everybody.